Hello and welcome to another gameplay video on the official MTG Arena channel. For this week I was tasked to make a historic video, so we're taking a look at Goblins, which received a pretty nice upgrade with the Lost Caverns of Ixalan in a Cavern of Souls, making our Goblins uncounterable, so that can be a great way of making a Muxus Goblin Grandee uncounterable in the late game when facing some of the control decks, so that way you don't get blown out after sacrificing your board to a Skirk Prospector. And this is a very important creature in the deck. 1 mana Goblin can sack any Goblin in play to add red mana, so Prospector allows us to potentially cast a turn 3 Muxus already if we curve it into a turn 2 Wily Goblin, which makes a treasure token when it enters. Could also play Goblin Anarchomancer, giving each red and green spell a 1 mana discount, so we could essentially cast a 5 mana Muxus, put it on the stack, sacrificing Anarchomancer and Prospector, making 2 more mana. So those are the ways of casting Muxus on turn 3. I guess you could technically also get there with turn 1 Prospector into a turn 2 Snoop, and then copy the ability of the creature that's on top of your deck. And if you happen to have a Krenko on top of the deck, Snoop can tap to make a few Goblin tokens, which can then be sacrificed to the Prospector to also cast Muxus. So there's a third secret way to also cast a Muxus on turn 3, but more realistically around turn 4, between our mana from a Prospector, the treasure from Wily Goblin, and the discount from either Anarchomancer and or our Goblin War Chief, giving Goblin spells a 1 mana discount and giving Goblin creatures we control haste, which is also very important because once we deploy Muxus, we're hoping to hit many Goblins off the top of our deck, put them in play, and then if we can give our team haste, we can attack right away, pumping up Muxus with its ability and hopefully getting in for lethal. Then Krenko also benefits from giving the team haste, as we can immediately tap it to make a bunch of 1/1 Goblin tokens, which can be sacrificed to Prospector, or maybe just enhanced by some of our lords. And besides War Chief, we also have 2 copies of Goblin Chieftain to give the team haste, also gives the team a +1/+1, just doesn't have the discount, so not quite as good at ramping out Muxus, but still very useful at dealing a lot of damage. And then we're running 4 copies of a Goblin Matron, which is a Goblin that lets us search up any Goblin in our deck and put it into our hand when it enters, so that's a way of consistently finding Muxus, as well as some of the other one-offs in the deck, and that's why we have 1 Horde Master, for instance. Sometimes we just want a cheap Lord that bumps up the rest of our team, especially with a discount from some of our creatures like Anarchomancer and the Goblin War Chief. We can play this for 1 mana, which can be very effective. And then we also have 1 Pashalik Mons, a 2/2, saying whenever Pashalik or another Goblin we control dies, it deals 1 damage to any target, which can also give us an alternate win condition. Besides attacking with our creatures, we can now make lots of Goblin tokens with Krenko, for instance, and then sacrifice them using the Prospector's ability to deal damage to the opponent and win the game. Can also potentially get around the 1 ring, where we can still take out the opponent in their upkeep before they get a chance to cast another copy. And then we've got 2 copies of Snoop, as we mentioned, can play Goblins off the top and potentially copy some abilities as well, such as Krenko or Prospector to sack our Goblins for mana. And then Wily Goblin, just a way for us to ramp as well. And then one of the advantages of playing a mana base that allows for both a green and a black splash through all these lands like Cavern of Souls, Courtyard, and Territory Naming Goblin is that we can run a few removal spells in creature form with Munitions Expert, can come down with Flash and dealing damage to a creature or planeswalker equal to the number of Goblins we control. Can also be an important way to stop the opponent from developing their game plan or potentially setting up a creature combo. Now we could also play a Goblins build with Cabaret Revels, potentially also with Goblin Trap Finder at 1 mana, but I decided to go with an all-creature build that also gets to play with Umori as companion, so that's a small upside, and we've got a few lands to help cast it, a few black lands here with Cliffs and Haunted Ridge, and then Copperline Gorge and Rockfall Vale, and I made sure not to include any shock lands in the mana base, since the life loss can be quite painful against some of the aggressive decks like Blue-Red Wizards, which can punish you for taking damage unnecessarily. And then another one-off is the Hobgoblin Bandit Lord, giving the team +1/+1, can also activate to use it as removal potentially. And then 1 Goblin Ringleader can also be nice to get with Goblin Matron in those grindier matchups especially, as it can enter, reveal the top 4 cards of our library, and put all Goblin cards revealed this way into our hand, as opposed to Muxus, which puts them straight onto the battlefield, so that's where having haste is pretty important. And then our mana base also has room for 2 copies of Den of the Bugbear, which can turn into a Goblin, making additional Goblin tokens when it attacks, so that can also be pretty nice against control. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand is powerful if we can cast our spells, but with no mana acceleration this seems a tad too slow. Well, this is not much better, but I think I'll keep this Don't want to go to 5. And then Snoop into Chieftain into Krenko, still a decent curve. Opponent blue-black with a Gaze, so a graveyard deck. Those tend to go off around turn 4 with cards like Mizzix's Mastery or Unburial Rite. Never mind, opponent's more of a dredge deck, putting in Narcomoeba. So we'll play Snoop. There's a Prospector on top, so we could sack Snoop right now to make a mana, not going to be very helpful. But Prospector will be useful later, especially if we draw Muxus or C1 on top. So the opponent's deck can kill pretty quickly if they get lucky with the cards they mill. So we'll see what happens here. They usually want to mill main phase, since Ghoul they cannot return in our end step. Unlike the Price and Amalgam, which they did find, but no way to get it back at the moment, so we were spared one of those explosive starts. There's Muxus. Okay, if I play Prospector, next turn we could already play Muxus. Could also play Chieftain and Curvedent Krenko, which we can then activate and turn after. Have more resources in case we get unlucky with Muxus. I think that's fine here, given that the opponent didn't have a super explosive start. Otherwise, I might have had to go all in on turn 4 Muxus. And then I don't really want to let the opponent mill with Supplier. We'll probably be able to win the game in one attack once we put Muxus on the battlefield. So anything to delay them from putting stuff in place, probably worth it. I don't expect much removal from their deck either. Opponent's gonna flash back a Gaze. And they're looking for more Amalgams, Narcomoeba. Creeping Chill can help them get back Ghoul. Wander will now give their team flying if they have an island, and Watery Grave is indeed an island. Okay, so that can still give us some issues. For now, play Krenko, which we can immediately activate. I may as well do it now, in case I do have some removal. And then do I want to attack all out? At 18, I think that's probably safe enough. Even if they mill 3 scary cards, we should be alright. Opponent can get back Bloodghast, although it's not going to have haste yet. But that is a way to also get back Price Amalgam. Glimpse milling 10 cards is a great way to enable their synergies. Gaze, not quite as exciting, despite it having flashback. So yeah, the opponent's draw wasn't the most explosive. They did eventually find a Creeping Chill, which will drain for 3, get back a Ghoul, which in turn gets back Amalgam. And now Bloodghast as well, triggering Amalgam. And next turn, Prospector into Muxus. Should be pretty effective. So play this on Goblin. Play Prospector. Could activate Krenko now. Or we can sack 2 Goblins since we're likely to put more Goblins in play. Only drawback is if we find another Krenko with Muxus, then I only get to keep 1 with a legendary rule. But there's not too many other copies in the deck. Okay, so activate Krenko, and I assume this is lethal. They can chump Muxus, chump Snoop, still take, let's see here, 38 damage, more or less. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and our hand is decent. Turn 1 Den, turn 2 on Narcomancer, using Cavern. And our opponent's playing kind of the Leyline Geist deck that's become popular recently. So we can expect him to cast a Fragment Reality to get a Geist. And yeah, we'll see if we can outrace turn 1 Geist. A Leyline Not super relevant, can shut down Pashalik, dealing damage since our creatures don't die if they get exiled. Could also go for a Wily Goblin, but Anarchomancer into Krenko sounds good. Opponent will have some auras to put on the Geist to enhance it. Still gonna take them a few turns. So this is an attack for 8. Munitions experts can maybe take out the Angel token. For now, Krenko, increase the number of goblins we have. And what we can do next turn is potentially play Expert, and then with the trigger on the stack, activate Krenko to make even more goblins. Opponent might have a slip out the back on their own token. Nope. That's a way to kind of save it for next turn. Okay, Copperline Gorge, not the best draw. So what's the plan here? If I go Wily Goblin, Chieftain, then I don't think we're presenting lethal. Can activate Krenko, make 4 tokens, which will be 2 each. So that's 10, 12, 14 damage if there's no interaction. So I think instead we could go for Wily Goblin and then Expert in the opponent's turn after activating Krenko. Opponent's gonna slip out the back, Krenko in response. That's no good. So activate Krenko now then. Can still Munitions Expert at instant speed, dealing 4 damage. So that can deal with the Angel for a turn, and then next turn we need to figure out a way to win. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. Next turn we get to untap, activate Krenko, and Chieftain will help cross the finish line. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand is missing some Curve Topper, but if we find Matron or Muxus, it could work out. So I'm gonna try it. Possible our opponent's on the turn 1 Geist deck if they're taking some aggressive mulligans. Nope, just red-green turn 1 Stomping Ground, and we did top deck Muxus right away. I think we'll go for turn 2 Wily Goblin over Anarchomancer. Since if this gets destroyed we don't get any value, whereas now we at least get a treasure. I see, opponent may be trying the Discover combo deck in Historic, and they're gonna combo here on turn 3 after making a treasure. Not much we can do about it. Although it looks like they don't have the Geological Appraiser, maybe they're playing a build with Quintorius, which can combo on the following turn. Either way, we can now play Prospector, which can speed up playing Muxus as well. And then play an Anarchomancer, I suppose. Nothing I can do to stop an opposing Discover combo. So we'll see. Are we dead to Quintorius? It's gonna be Pantlasa instead. So I'm assuming that's gonna Discover and still set up the combo. Glasspool Mimic to copy it. So they can keep one of them, Discover again. And then find Appraiser, which will eventually find a copy of Eldritch Evolution, I'm sure. For now a Mimic can copy Appraiser. So I guess Pantlasa adding a bit more redundancy to the Discover combo in Historic, as opposed to the Explorer build. And there's the Evolution, sack Appraiser to get Trumpeting Carnosaur. and at some point evolution into a creature to give the team haste. So we're pretty likely dead here, unless our opponent gets unlucky and finds all the Eldritch Evolutions before they find more creatures, but doesn't seem to be the case. So that's Eldritch Evolution number 2, I believe. Most lists are playing 4, some I've seen play 3 copies. And there's another evolution, so at least they hit them all pretty early on. So now if they can put a Doomscar Titan into play, give the team haste, are we dead? Doomscar itself doesn't have trample, so we might be able to survive it barely. But another Carnosaur means they have another Eldritch Evolution. Pantlaza finds a Glassball Mimic, copy Carnosaur, and they'll eventually discover the final Eldritch Evolution. And now find Doomscar Titan, which I'm hoping they have the only copy in hand, but there we go. Alright, GG's. That's more than enough. Just one turn away from casting Muxus. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Don't have anything to find Muxus, but hopefully just playing a few of these chieftains and other lords in combination with a bit of removal can keep us alive. Put on blue-white. So having Cavern to make stuff uncounterable could be relevant. And a March is going to exile the Anarchomancer, pitching another March. In that case, can go for War Chief, hit for 2, and still get the discount for next turn. This is a type of matchup where finding a Ringleader is going to be pretty effective. Just needs a steady supply of goblins. Snoop to play goblins over the top can also be effective. For now, we could play Anarchomancer, play Chieftain and smash, or maybe Wily Goblin. If we expect a sweeper next turn, might be better than Anarchomancer right now. Might have wanted to keep the Cavern to make Chieftain uncounterable as opposed to the Wily Goblin, which we don't really care about. That resolves. And a March number 3, pitching a Wandering Emperor. They might have another Wandering Emperor in hand to exile War Chief. Expert can also damage Planeswalkers for what it's worth. Alright, so we're still missing Muxus or a way to access it here. Still probably worth it to deploy more goblins. Play Anarchomancer, attack, have Expert available. If they Wandering Emperor make a 2-2 to try and block Wily Goblin, we can take it out. Opponent takes it. Pass it back. And a Memory Deluge goes digging. So we might see a Sweeper next turn to try and stabilize. Divine Purge. At least we can still replay our creatures. Could have sacrificed my treasure, but I wasn't going to use it. Another Cavern. And I think I wanted to hang on to the Expert so we could maybe finish off a Planeswalker. So we could go for Anarchomancer plus Prospector, or we can just tap out for War Chief. It will enter tapped, so can't attack with it. Opponent drawing 2 with Charm. Okay. So now Anarchomancer also enters tapped, but lets me play 2-mana Wily Goblin. And our opponent's going to reprieve it. So it still has the tax applied to it. Alright, in that case, just hit for 2. Gonna try and hang on to the expert still. And there's the fairy. That's the reason why. It's gonna plus.
Let's skip to the good part.
Can deal 2 damage to it.
That was uncalled.
Would love to top deck Muxus, we've got the mana to cast it. It's gonna be another Prospector instead. Alright, let's replay on Archomancer, still enters tapped. Play Wily Goblin, could unload some Prospectors. Maybe start with Prospector. And then an Archomancer. Opponent Reprieve still works through Cavern of Souls since it doesn't technically counter. But yeah, now our opponent is probably going to lose the Fairy at least. Don't think we want to sack anything to the Prospector, so let's just attack. And I don't think we want to play more into a sweeper potentially. Could put Omori in hand as well, which is reasonable. Try this. And there's another Teferi. So with Reprieve they could still delay Muxus potentially. No Muxus in sight. Alright, in that case, play Prospector. All at the Ferry. And we might see Wandering Emperor now. Snapcaster on maybe a March or a Reprieve. So if I don't put anything on the stack, there's nothing for them to Reprieve.
You know what? I'm not.
Opponent makes a token so they can untap the castle, make another one. Still waiting on Matron or Muxus. There we go. Let's see if they've got another Reprieve at the ready. They do. Alright, we'll try again next turn. Could hit the Ferry for 1. Trade a Prospector for a human token. Doesn't seem needed. So if they are playing with Snapcaster, they could still flash back the Reprieve, otherwise there's only one left.
No time for a break.
Opponent is halfway through the deck, so they've drawn their fair share. This sort of implies a sweeper's incoming. Don't really care about taking 1 damage either way. Divine Purge. That works. Okay, let's try Muxus again. A Reprieve number 4. Alright.
You know what? I'm not.
Now our opponent's likely to have some instant speed removal, so they can maybe take out the only haste enabling Goblin, so they don't take any damage and then wipe the board. But we'll see. Just need to get lucky off this Muxus if it finally resolves. A War Chief into Muxus is an option. They're gonna bounce the War Chief. Alright, 2 mana left. Can we hit another haste-enabling Goblin? We cannot, only Ringleader, at least finding double Matron. So pretty disappointing Muxus. Opponent could almost ultimate Teferi, -8. Shark Typhoon hardcast, their opponent's about to make lots of shark tokens. And a Supreme Verdict to wipe the board, including the shark. So they'll have 3 mana here after untapping. And we're just gonna slam down another Muxus. War Chief first, like last time. Making sure we leave a Cavern untapped. No Snapcast or Reprieve available. They've cast all 4 Reprieves. So unless they can counter the triggered ability somehow, we should be in the clear. Disruption's not gonna work. I guess they just want to make a shark token here. And we hit a Krenko. That's nice. And that's enough for a concession. Awesome. So we slogged our way through this blue-white control deck onto the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and our hand is decent. Not amazing. Can play turn on Prospector or guarantee 2-drop on curve. I guess I'll still go for Prospector. We might draw another untapped land. Okay, Portable Hole, a nice answer to the Prospector here. So we're not getting that one back. Okay, Copperline Gorge to the rescue, play Snoop, and then of the Bugbear coming up. Opponent mono-white so far, and a Reign of Truth, alright, already with 3 artifacts or enchantments. Hits us for 3. Matron on top, can play it, and maybe get another Prospector, so we can speed up the process of getting Muxus down. Courtyard on top. So yeah, next turn I could play Prospector, and then sack all my goblins to play Muxus, which may or may not be worth it. For now, Volt Scourge can give the opponent more life. And another Reign of Truth. So next turn we could possibly die already. Since Reign of Truth pumps for 7. So yeah, I shouldn't be counting on getting another turn here. A land on top means our Muxus is less likely to hit something big. But I think we still go for it here. Might hit a Munitions Expert, which can take something out. Hit double Wily Goblin, so we've got more treasure. And yeah, probably go for Horde Master and Smash. But I don't think that's going to be enough for lethal necessarily. I guess we're getting close with a Muxus trigger here. Yeah, I guess our opponent will have to chump. Makes it less likely that Reign of Truth is lethal on the way back. So we'll see what happens. A third Reign of Truth might still do it. Opponent moves to attackers, so that's a good sign. And yeah, if they're not attacking for lethal here, they should be pretty dead on the way back. Goblin Matron could also get something here. I guess we have to play around a Settled Wreckage potentially. So what can I get to play around that? Could get Pashalik to sacrifice our goblins, although I don't have a Prospector to sacrifice my creatures. So instead, I could just get a Munitions Expert, so I don't have to overextend with my attack, and that can make sure we don't die on the way back. I guess that's reasonable. Could also, let's see, another Muxus. Gonna be a little bit short of casting. Krenko would have haste, so could also get Krenko make a bunch of tokens. Doesn't be Zelda Wreckage right now, and then I could still lose to another Reign of Truth. So I think the safest play might be Munitions Experts. And then could still play Snoop and have Expert available. So don't want to send in too many creatures. Something like this seems reasonable. Opponent jumps. Alright, looks like we got there. Just making sure we didn't lose randomly to settle into something else. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We've got an explosive opening with Prospector and Archimancer War Chief, just missing Goblin Matron or Muxus to kind of top off our curve. Opponent on what could be a Charbelcher deck. So they could potentially win on turn 3 with a great draw, going Ironcrag Feet into Charbelcher Activate, after making a treasure token here. So we'll play an Archimancer, hit for 1. Next turn we could double War Chief if we sack a creature to the Prospector. Munitions Expert not going to be very helpful. So our opponent's got the treasure. Let's see if they have an Ironcrag Feet into Charbelcher or just Charbelcher. Could still top deck Muxus or Goblin Matron here to try and win next turn, although it's not incredibly likely. It's going to be a Strike it Rich for now. And an offer you can't refuse to make more treasure. Okay. And there's Krenko. So yeah, let's go War Chief into Krenko now. Can sack Prospector itself. Also reasonable to sack an Archimancer to keep Prospector, since I can make more mana with Goblin tokens from Krenko. Should be able to present lethal next turn, but we might be dead here to a Charbelcher. Ironcrag Feed into Charbelcher will definitely do it. And looks like creativity to get Charbelcher instead. Still 3 mana floating, which is enough to activate it and win the game. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a fine hand. Prospector into Wily Goblin, Matron gets Muxus, cast it on turn 4. Opponent taking some aggressive mulligans, so there's certainly some sort of combo deck. And yeah, if they're on the play, they could potentially win before we cast Muxus. It looks like another Leyline Geist deck. Putting a Geist on turn 1. Well, at least they're empty-handed, so they might not be able to enhance it, so we can actually block it next turn. That's the hope. Take 6 for now. Turn to Wily Goblin. And stay back to block. And we'll see if they have a trick here. They can't really attack if Geist would trade. They found a combat research, gives it 1 extra power, so now it doesn't trade anymore. So that's an attack for 7. Don't think I'd chump Geist just to deny the card draw. And Anarchomancer is next. So now what? I could play Anarchomancer, play Warchief for 2 mana, play 1 mana Goblin Matron, and take things from there. I guess that's fine. And then the plan is probably still to get Muxus, which I could cast right now if I sack all 4 of my goblins. Yeah, that could be worth it, but we're giving up a lot and we may only be left with Muxus, but it would still be enough to block Geist. So maybe that's the play. Could also pass, and then we can chump Geist and then next turn cast Muxus with a lot more goblins in play, so it's more likely to be lethal. Yeah, let's just try that instead. So send in Prospector and Warchief. Could double block Geist. And otherwise we can chump it with a Matron. Alright, Geist goes to attackers. They could have a slip out the back to interact here for 1 mana. Still gonna go for it. It's gonna be another Fragment Reality instead. Yep, so we replace that with Prospector. And then we just need to win next turn. Okay, play Muxus, sacking a Prospector, and hope to hit big. Oh, we hit it reasonably well, and this should be just enough for lethal here, just double checking, although it's not like we can do much else here. And our opponent explodes, awesome. Alright, so we got to see our goblins in action, and yeah, Historic is a pretty crazy format at the moment, lots of combo decks capable of doing some pretty broken things. Goblins remains a pretty fair deck, all things considered, but Muxus does give you that combo potential. If you've got the early mana acceleration, you could technically win on turn 3 already, but more realistically on turn 4, which is sometimes too slow in this format. On the bright side, at least goblins are pretty resilient against interaction, so if you're starting to face more control decks with discard or counter spells, then this build with Cavern of Souls will have its time to shine. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.